Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the COP28 Presidency Press Conference. My name is Shona McGeekin, and I'm honoured to be your moderator today. After a positive start to COP28, we've now reached the most crucial point of our journey, the negotiations. I'm pleased to be joined by Dr. Sultan Al-Jabbar, COP28 President, Simon Steele, UNFCCC Executive Secretary, and our incredible team of ministerial pairs that will help us get to the goal line. Thank you all for being here, and thank you for your leadership and commitment. After formal remarks, we will open the floor for questions from the media. But without further ado, Dr. Sultan, you have the floor.
Thank you, Shana, and allow me first to start by saying how delighted I am to be with all of you this afternoon, and sorry for coming late, and thank you for your patience. As you know, we had a very busy, packed, but very productive morning at the plenary, and allow me to welcome you all to the beginning of this second week of COP28, and I do hope that you did manage to get some rest yesterday, and that you are all ready for what will definitely be a momentous few days ahead. I think we can all agree that COP28 has been different. And I'm sure we all agree that COP28 has already made history. There is a unique sense of momentum, a sense of inclusivity, and a sense of willingness and flexibility. I also feel a sense that something unprecedented is possible to happen here at COP28 and in Dubai. We achieved consensus on the first day with the loss and damage, and I believe with the momentum we have, with the action-oriented mindset that have been instilled across the board here on this site, I believe we can achieve consensus again on the rest of the agenda. And I am quite positive, hopeful, and optimistic that that is going to be the case. And as you heard me say this morning to parties, in the next few days, we do have the potential to deliver a paradigm shift centered around and based on the science that keeps 1.5 within reach, an approach that will help redefine global economies, and consensus that will put the most vulnerable at the center of climate action. Here is where the work really begins. And without the cooperation and collaboration, we cannot and we will not succeed. And today, I'm delighted to introduce you to the team of ministers that have helped this presidency achieve this deep understanding of what is going to take to deliver the most ambitious outcome at this COP. And I am here to introduce the COP28 ministerial pairs, who have been instrumental in guiding this presidency and, of course, will be very essential in helping us get to the finish line. They have been working closely with this presidency as well as with parties over the last 6 months. And as you know, we made it a point. We established this ministerial pairs much earlier than the normal. In fact, I made it a point of engaging them very early in the exercise simply because I wanted to build a diverse, highly skilled, experienced team that would engage in defining the steps that are required and that we need to take and undertake to get us to this point, as well as for them to help us conduct our work here at COP28. Their job is to identify political challenges in the negotiations and to work with parties to bridge divides and to find the necessary solutions. And this is one of the reasons I believe we have achieved some of our successes so far, including, of course, the historic agreement on loss and damage. Over the next 48 hours, this team of ministers, or the ministerial pairs, will play a crucial role in helping bring this COP to consensus around the GST and all other mandates as part of the agenda. And this is your chance to hear directly from all of them. Leading on adaptation, I am joined by Her Excellency Maisa Rojas of Chile and Her Excellency Jenny McAllister of Australia. On mitigation, His Excellency Espen Barth Eid of Norway and Her Excellency Grace Fu of Singapore. On finance, Her Excellency Dr. Yasmin Fouad of Egypt and His Excellency Stephen Jalbou of Canada. And leading on the global stocktake is His Excellency Dan Jørgensen of Denmark and Her Excellency Barbara Creasy of South Africa. Together, they represent every continent, and we made sure that in the process of identifying who would be the best fit, we made sure that we ensure that we cover all continents. They all have deep level of expertise across the entire climate agenda and know and have had the experience of how to bridge gaps, bridge between gaps and bring people together. And they are part of the reason this COP has demonstrated a remarkable level of unity and solidarity thus far. This solidarity helped us deliver real and tangible results already. We've been able to mobilize over $83 billion in pledges, commitments and investments, catalyze action across energy, nature and finance, deliver the first COP declarations on cooling, health and food, actively include youth, indigenous peoples, faith communities and local leaders, and of course push the private sector to step up and to be part of this very important COP and to drive the solutions required to help mitigate climate and ensure that everything we do, every step of the way, is underpinned with full inclusivity and based on the science and keeping 1.5 within reach. These successes over the past week have given us a great boost going into this week. But like I said before, this is where the hard part starts, and the work of this ministerial pairs begins in helping resolve political issues. Expectations are high, And I hope you have seen the letter that has just been released probably a couple of hours ago, signed by over 1,000 scientists, CEOs, indigenous peoples, mayors, governors, youth, health professionals, and faith leaders, all urging parties to come together around a rapid response to the global stocktake. This is the challenge that parties must rise to against the clock. In fact, it is fast moving, and we need to adapt and shift gears and move even faster. I will spend every moment focused on enabling, facilitating, and supporting the most ambitious outcome, and I am very optimistic that the new spirit we have generated here is helping make this COP a transformational COP, a COP that has the potential of changing the game. Now allow me to open the floor to our team of ministerial peers, and then we will be happy to take your questions. I thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sultan. Simon, I now open the floor for your remarks.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Time is of the essence, so I will be brief. We all know the scale of the climate crisis. COP28 must be about solutions to get all countries out of this climate mess. That is my central focus. Solutions, acceleration, the highest ambition here at the COP, and a springboard for the crucial years ahead. COP28 must deliver a big switch, not just what governments must do, but also how to get the job done. The technologies and the tools all exist. This week, negotiators must agree on putting them to work. In short, it's go time for governments at COP28 this week. There are low, middle, and high ambition options on many issues. If we want to save lives now and keep 1.5 within reach, the highest ambition COP outcomes must stay front and centre in these negotiations. So I urge negotiators to start with the highest ambition outcomes, and then for them to ask, how do we get there? Yes, compromises will be essential, but not on ambition. The UNFCCC will be an honest broker and convener within this process. We will make sure every country has a seat at the table and can use their full voices. This week, I don't want to see diversions and political tactics that hold climate ambition hostage. I urge all ministers and negotiators to think outside the box. Climate action needs that paradigm shift. Yes, 8 billion people are now on the front lines, but bold climate action is also a momentous opportunity, an opportunity for more jobs, healthier economic growth, less pollution, and better human health. This is what billions of people in every country want. And bolder climate action is the chance for governments to deliver it here in Dubai. Every country is hungry for the next source of stable economic growth. Billions of households are struggling to put bread on the table. So bold climate action can be the meal ticket for the 21st century. This week in Dubai, all countries must cooperate to put it in reach. I thank you.
Thank you, Simon. I know you have to leave fairly shortly, so we will now proceed. Thank you very much for joining us. We will open the floor to our ministerial pairs to give brief remarks, and if I could invite Minister Barbara Creasy and Minister Dan Jurgensen to start. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon to everybody. The COP presidency has asked Denmark and South Africa to consult on important framing issues. And these issues go to the foundation on which the global stocktake as an ambition mechanism is built: science and equity. When we speak about science, we are talking about how the urgency is conveyed by reflecting on the best available scientific outcomes enshrined in the 6th IPCC assessment report, and how we will manage to convey this urgency in the outcomes of the GST. On equity, it is vital to frame that equity can and should enable ambition. The presidency has asked us to consult on many understandings of equity, and it is vital that we are able to develop a shared understanding of how equity applies across the scope of the global stocktake, including on issues such as mitigation, adaptation, means of implementation, loss and damage and response measures, finance, tech and capacity. All of these issues will need to reflect the principle of equity. We have been specifically asked to look at pre-2020 and the complex issue of common but differentiated responsibilities and respective capabilities. Important in the stocktake is to look at information from science on what happened prior to 2020, and good technical information is available in the Technical Dialogue Synthesis report. We will also explore how to address the concerns on unilateral trade measures. It is important that ambition and equity, based on the best available science, inform action. The GST outcome will inform the NDCs and international cooperation going forward. There are some existing guidelines on NDCs, but when we all get home from this COP and start preparing for our second NDC, we need to know what more we must do as a result of the global stocktake, and what novel forms of international cooperation can be established here in Dubai. I thank you.
Thank you, Barbara. We are here to negotiate a deal. We're here to talk and to listen, to persuade and to be persuaded. But we need to remember one thing. We cannot negotiate with nature. The climate cannot compromise. No well-meaning words will change a single thing unless we act, unless we decide to make a real difference. The presidency has done a fantastic job preparing this COP. Dr. Sultan has set the bar high, but the presidency cannot create results on their own. All parties need to engage. All parties need to step up. I'm proud to be a part of this able, idealistic and competent team. I want to thank you, Dr. Sultan, for trusting us with this important task. We will do our utmost to facilitate the deliberation in the coming days as best possible. The global stocktake is the engine of the Paris Agreement. Its purpose is to ensure that we meet our targets. Sadly, our starting point is clear. We are not on track. This week may be our last opportunity to bring us on course to keeping 1.5 alive, with more ambitious and just climate action, with more renewable energy and energy efficiency, replacing fossil fuels. On course on adaptation, on course to mobilize the financing that is necessary. It needs to be a just and balanced result with equity. After hours and hours of conversations with parties, I really mean it when I say I believe we can do this. I believe it is possible. Barbara and I will start consultations with groups already today. There will be a hot session on the third text that will be circulated shortly. So, we cannot negotiate with nature, but we can negotiate with each other. No argument, no political or economic reasoning will stop the temperature from increasing. Words on a piece of paper will not in itself save the climate. But if we agree, if we decide, we can make these words carry real weight. Make them instigate real change. Make a real difference. So friends, let's do it. Let's make this COP the most important COP since Paris. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Could I invite Minister Grace Fu and Minister Espen Barth Ida? You have the floor.
Thank you very much. First of all, good afternoon, everyone, and really thank you for the opportunity to speak here. The UAE has provided a vision for COP28 that includes a paradigm shift, as we heard, of fast-tracking the energy transition and slashing emissions before 2030. The COP28 President has referred to 1.5 degree as our North Star and reminded us many times that we have a common interest in climate action, even when we have different national circumstances. I would like to thank the UAE COP28 presidency for entrusting Singapore and Norway with the responsibility of co-facilitating on ministerial consultations on mitigation at COP28. I'm delighted to be partnering Norwegian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Espen Barth Eide, as ministerial co-facilitators for our third year running. For COP26 and COP27, we were handling what we call the spaghetti soup issues of Article 6. Over the past months, we have been engaging parties through virtual and in-person consultations, which have helped us gain a better understanding of parties' aspirations and concerns for a successful COP28 outcome on mitigation. And we will be consulting parties over the next few days and co-facilitating the 2023 annual high-level ministerial roundtable on pre-2030 ambition tomorrow, which will provide us with important opportunities to gather further views and facilitate exchange between parties. I'll now hand over to Espen.
Thank you, Grace. Minister Fu and I are delighted and very serious and very humbled about taking on this incredibly important task. I can share with you then when I was asked by the presidency to take this role and on the very crucial and complicated issue of mitigation, I said, I hope I can do that with Grace. And then they said, well, we just called Grace, and she said they wanted to do it with me. So I'm happy to do this together, and we will be very, very dedicated and serious in going into this crucial topic. How do we actually cut emissions? How do we actually deal with the key issue of mitigation, which is so central to this work? Is also central to the work of adaptation and means of implementation and loss and damage and so on, because the better we mitigate, the less costly will the rest be. We need all of this, but of course, if you really care about adaptation, you should also care about mitigation, because the lower temperature outcome, the less there is to adapt to, and at one point, adaptation is no longer possible. If we seriously exceed 1.5, we will be in a very, very different and very dangerous world. So that's why this is so important. We will now consult intensively with all parties. We do that as we will do across the groups and as we have done in previous COPs, meeting with the groups in their different clusters, the different groupings. We will listen, we will have some targeted questions, and then we will get the feedback and collect them and see if we can move forward. We've been on this for a while, so we have had the consultations both virtually and also in the pre-COP with all parties. And from that, I dare to say that we see some points of convergence. There seems to be broad agreement on the need for enhanced ambition. There seems to be broad agreement on the need for better implementation of what has already been decided. But we also know very well that there are many issues where parties do not yet agree, in particular on how to build on the decision from the Glasgow Climate Pact and also how to respond to the IPCC 6th assessment report and to get some key messages on how to accelerate and deepen global mitigation efforts. So we will have honest discussions with the parties to identify new mitigation opportunities, identify challenges, try to reduce them, look for possible measures and best practices, and also see how we can meet the long-term Paris Agreement goal. And as Co-President Dr. Sultan always keeps reminding us, 1.5 is our North Star. And as Dan said, there's not much space left to live up to that ambition. So we need to, and I just want to underline that point, we are here to negotiate with each other how we as mankind deal with our collective problem. But we are not here to negotiate with physics and nature and chemistry, because these are givens. And the world does not react, the physical world does not react to statements, but to actions. It reacts to physical stimuli. So we really, really need now to focus on what we actually do on energy transition, to really deal with the key issue of energy transition, with non-CO2 gases as well, with methane, and there's been some very promising news on the methane scene over the last days, which I think is really welcome, because methane is much worse than CO2, but much more short-lived, so it actually matters faster also to reduce their emissions. And of course also forest, ocean and sinks, which is part of mitigation, because net zero, of course, is what we emit and what we're able to capture. There might be some room for carbon capture and storage, but the main job is done by nature if we allow nature to remain nature. So that's also part of what we will be doing, and we look forward to working with a very able presidency and with Dr. Sultan Al-Jabr and his team, and with all of you as we move forward.
Thank you, Minister. Could I invite Minister Jennifer McAllister and Minister Maisa Rojas? You have the floor.
Thank you very much. Can I start by thanking Dr. Sultan for bringing this group of people together? It's a pleasure to work with such an accomplished group. As others have indicated, this COP, we are called to meaningfully respond to the science of climate change and to assess our progress against the goals of the Paris Agreement. The truth is that the effects of climate change are already being felt, and there is more to come. The adaptation workstream at this COP is about galvanising global action to make our nations more resilient to a warming world. Now, I am an Australian, and I can assure you that Australians are keenly understanding the effects of drought, of storms, of bushfires and of floods. And we also know that in our region, the people of the Pacific more broadly are exposed to some of climate change's worst effects, and sooner than most others. So 2 years ago in Glasgow, the parties agreed that we needed to strengthen our collective response and preparation, and I was delighted that the COP President asked me and my friend, Minister Rojas of Chile, a distinguished climate scientist herself, back in September to take on a role consulting on this work. And we are here, as we were at pre-COP and before that, listening to parties' views and working towards a consensus. Parties are very clear. Agreeing a framework for the global goal for adaptation is important to building resilience for a warming world, but it is also important for building consensus here at COP28 for ambitious action to reduce emissions. The truth is that these goals are intertwined. Every 1/10 of a degree of warming makes the adaptation task harder. And so I look forward to working with parties on this element of a shared agreement for progress here in Dubai. And I'll invite Mesa to make some additional comments.
Thank you, Jenny. I also would like to thank the COP President to having invited us to help with getting us to the finishing line all together. But remember that, I mean, we are here to help, but the job is really done by absolutely everyone here in the room and in the rest of the venue. Also very honored to be able to help on adaptation. We have heard a lot, and we all know that adaptation is really lagging behind. And I just very briefly want to quote from the UNEP Adaptation Gap report, very recently report, that concludes that there is inadequate investment and planning on climate adaptation that leaves our world exposed. So that's what we are all having to deal with. And in that sense, having a framework is, of course, very important. As Minister Makalita already said, we have been consulting with the groups and parties since September. And everyone agrees that the framework is important to help to lift up adaptation that is lagging behind. So the framework should help us to build that world that is resilient to warming, but it has to be not just any warming, right? It has to be a warming where we can still adapt, because, as others said, otherwise it's just loss and damage. So we heard also very clearly in our consultations that, therefore, a guiding star was important as well to pursue the global goal on adaptation. And that guiding star is related to this building of resilience. So that's the good part of it. We know where we want to be. We know we need to lift it up. It is still complicated because, for example, we did not actually get a text to start our consultation with. So as you heard from Dr. Sultan earlier, there will be technical consultations that will continue by the SB chairs, and me and Jennifer will in parallel consult on the more political issues that are still outstanding. So we will very closely coordinate with the SB chairs so that we can, the four together, bring you the ideas so that you can take it up from there and really hope that we get a good outcome for adaptation and the framework. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. And now can I invite Minister Yasmin Fuhad and Minister Stephen Gilbow. You have the floor.
Thank you very much. I'll try to stick to the 2 minutes because of the essence of time. Let me start by thanking Dr. Sultan for a very positive start for the COP and for hosting us all in this beautiful city of Dubai that we hope by the 12th that we finish, so that we have time to enjoy the city, and for convening that friendly group for co-facilitating the COP28 presidency responsibility and work in a very critical time, a time that climate crisis appears and is shown daily. Me and Steve, I'd like also to thank Steve. This is our second time that we are pairing together. We've done that on COP15, and believe it or not, that was very difficult task at that time, but we did it, and we engaged with all ministers at the political level. But as now it is different with the climate crisis that is happening daily, we've been trying to engage with all parties. We've started that process informally in order to understand different views. We wanted to ensure inclusivity and a party-driven process. And part of that also is that we had views from different observers, because we wanted to ensure, as COP President has indicated, an inclusive COP to make it really happen. Last, we're very keen that we look at all aspects for means of implementation. So we're talking about finance, technology transfer, and capacity development, because it's a package and it has to be running up together in order to put that on track and push the agenda forward. And inshallah, we will be able to do it. Over to you, Steve.
Thank you very much, Yasmin. First, Dr. Sultan, thank you so much for the trust you've put in me and this wonderful group of ministers. And as Yasmin was saying, not only were the two of us paired together in Montreal at COP15, but 4 of the 8 co-facilitators that you see here were also working together in COP15 in Montreal. So I think, Dr. Sultan, you've chosen a good group of dedicated and expert ministers to do these things. I also want to say that we're here to support your vision, Dr. Sultan, for this COP. Like others have said, the global stocktake is our collective chance to keep 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach. I feel optimistic and very eager to engage countries in the coming days, and as you pointed out, busy days are ahead of us. But as someone who's participated in this process since COP1 in Berlin in 1995, I can't recall a COP where on the first day we agreed on such momentous elements like we did on loss and damage. And for that, I want to congratulate you and your team and everyone who made this possible. We've made some progress on finance, but we know we have more progress to make. We understand from the OECD that developed nations have likely reached a $100 billion goal last year, but there's so much more that needs to be done. Our conversation here need to be transformational, and when it comes to finance, it needs to be based on needs, on the gaps that we are seeing, and on access. And this is our role, Yasmin and I, to help see this happen. Look forward to working with all of you and all of the nations that are present here to deliver an optimistic and hopeful outcome at COP28. Thank you.
Thank you, Ministers, for your remarks. We will now open the floor for questions. As a reminder, please state your name, your outlet, and who your question is directed to. With so many on the panel, it would be very helpful if you could state who you would like your question answered to. Do we have some microphones? Can I invite on the third row, I think it's the third row, in the middle here.
Benjamin Legendre, AFP, a question for Dr. Sultan. Can you assure the world that is watching us that there will be targets on oil, coal and gas in the final text of this COP?
What I can guarantee you is that I will continue to stay laser focused on keeping 1.5 within reach. That is my North Star, and my job, the way I understand it, is to keep that North Star shining every step of the way. That I promise and I commit I will maintain. Having said that, we need a collective decision, and this decision will come from the floor, from all parties, represented by 198 members. My job is to ensure that I recognize the process, respect the process, enable them, facilitate the process, and of course support throughout. One thing I've repeatedly said is that phase down of fossil fuel is inevitable, it is essential, and a decline of fossil fuel consumption is going to happen for sure over time. While I also say this, I must remind you that we have all along embraced the energy transition like no other. Having said that, we have always been practical, realistic, pragmatic, and results-driven. We must be fair, we must be just, we must be equitable, we must be orderly and responsible when it comes to the energy transition. So, in short, I have promised that I will facilitate and enable the maximum and most ambitious outcome. and I will help all parties achieve the consensus required.
Thank you, Dr. Sultan. Can we go towards the back of the room? Lady in the centre there, just behind. Thank you.
Jayashree from Hindustan Times. I wanted to ask Ministers Dan and Barbara, how would you address the issue of CBDR in the language on fossil fuel phase out, coal, oil and gas?
So common but differentiated responsibility. It's a very important principle in the Paris Agreement, and it needs to be a very important principle also in the outcome of this COP. What does it mean? Well, it basically means that we all have a responsibility to act. We all have a responsibility to be a part of the solution, but that responsibility is differentiated. Some countries need to do more than others. I represent a country that needs to do more than others. Why? Well, because we've been a part of the problem for more than 100 years, and we have a certain level of wealth. It goes without saying that other countries are still in a process of growing, becoming a developed country, going from being a developing country, have a much lower emission per capita than my own country, for instance. So this needs to be reflected, and it needs to be reflected in the issues that you refer to, which is the question of phase out of fossils, but it also needs to be reflected in the other tracks. Mitigation, for sure, but also adaptation, also financing.
Maybe if I may just add, I think that for developing countries, ambition is essentially driven by the means of implementation. So many developing countries would say that they are severely impacted upon by climate change. They want to keep 1.5 within reach, and they are asking developed countries for the technology and the financial mechanisms to achieve that. And I think that, as Dr. Sultan has correctly indicated, this is a party-driven process. It is the role of Dan and myself, having listened very carefully to all of the parties that will consult with us, to find those landing zones that can allow this important interface, as I was saying in my introductory remarks, between science and equity.
Could we go the 1, 2, 3, fourth row, Justin from the BBC? Could you just wait for the microphone for a second, Justin? Thank you.
Justin Rowlatt from the BBC. You've talked a lot about your bold ambitions for this conference, Dr. Sultan, and you've got an impressive array of ministers here. Crucial to this will be you advocating for a strong outcome, particularly with the nations we know that are reluctant, say, for example, on the issue of fossil fuels. What concrete actions will you be taking to bring on board, for example, countries like China, like Russia, and particularly like Saudi Arabia, that we all know has taken a very strong stand against even phasing down fossil fuels?
I can assure you that I have been engaging with everyone and with all parties, including relevant stakeholders represented by NGOs, civil society, and many other observers, as well as businesses and industry. So I can comfortably say I did not leave any stone unturned that can help facilitate my drive and my commitment for the highest possible ambition ever coming out of a COP. And I certainly hope that we will agree, or the parties will agree, and present a recommendation to the presidency on language at this COP on fossil fuels that includes renewable energy and energy efficiency, in line, of course, with what I said earlier, a just, fair, equitable, responsible, and orderly transition. Given the approach we have taken, and allow me to say, the political will and the support from the leadership in the host country, and our ability to convene what we are all experiencing here in Dubai at COP28, and our ability to receive such an overwhelming positive response from the ministers beside me in helping us drive the maximum ambition, I am quite confident that something special is going to come out of this COP.
Thank you, Dr. Sultan. The lady 4 rows back here in the white jacket.
Okay, thank you very much. We know that every government has paid a lot of effort to solve climate problems. But we know that the net zero is emission minus nature's capacity of absorption, the CO2 equals to 0. But right now we talk about fossil fuels. But what if our nature dies, like in Dubai? Water is more expensive than oil. So livestock has destroyed the forests, our land and ocean, and the topic of ocean has not been widely addressed. So I would like to know the reason why such a simple action to change diet can save our world maybe in 3 years, but we focus on the most expensive one about fossil fuels. Please let us know such a simple action, why government don't focus on this subject. Thank you so much.
Could I direct that to the end? Thank you very much.
I'd like to come in there because that's absolutely well put. And last year we had a very successful outcome from the Kunming-Montreal Global Diversity Framework, where we promised to conserve 30% of all land and sea, and also to restore degraded land and sea areas, which is precisely both because we need to do so to preserve biodiversity, but also because of the carbon sink function of nature. So we need to do both. And on the mitigation track, we are focusing on both. And we want, I know very many parties want to connect the work we're doing on the climate file with the nature file, because they're naturally connected. And they all came out of the Rio summit, where it was all supposed to be one big package. It's absolutely an imperative that we keep the rainforest, that we keep the forest cover, that we look after the health of our ocean, because they need to help us with the emissions we will still have, even when we have phased out most of the fossil emissions. So we need to do both, and we will definitely have that as part of our conversations.
And if I may add, I want to really thank you, Dr. Sultan, for making such an important place to nature as part of this conference. We have a Nature Day on the 9th. We're seeing more and more countries talk about the nexus between climate and nature, talking about the Kunming-Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework, and the fact that for the very reasons that Espen has just outlined, we need to work on both at the same time, and we're very determined to do that.
Yes, and just one thing on the nature, beside the Nature Day, we have two things that COP28 also is calling for, and I think that would be also part of the final decisions. The water and food has a day, and there are many initiatives on that. And the biodiversity, land and nature, as we started that in COP27, we came to the Global Biodiversity Framework, and we're continuing on here. So coming from COP27 decision to COP15 decision, we think that COP28 will have something tangible on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Lady on the front row over here in blue. Thank you.
Sophie Mkwena from the South African Broadcasting Corporation. The developing countries are saying, Dr. Sultan, that the issue of technology, there's a tendency by the developed countries or industrialized countries, particularly the G7, to dump the technology on developing countries. They are not transferring skills. And these countries are the ones that are struggling in terms of catching up with the developed countries who are industrialized, and they used the resources of the developing countries, particularly regions such as Sub-Sahara, to be where they are. What can we expect in terms of emphasizing the importance of technology transfer? And finally, on financing, the way it's structured, developing countries are saying, we don't have money. If we have to repay those loans, some of the countries, they won't even afford. It's equal to their own GDPs. What can we expect from that front?
This, in fact, goes hand in hand with what the COP28 presidency has been trying to nurture. We can no longer only view climate change as a burden or as a problem or as a challenge. We must turn that narrative and change it into an opportunity, because indeed it is an opportunity. It can be seen as the new industrial revolution. It can be a new economic development program that will help create new jobs, new industries, new revenue streams, and of course ensure sustainability and sustainable socio-economic development across the globe. But to do that, we need to take a step back, we need to be realistic, we need to be pragmatic, and we need to be comprehensive and holistic in our approach. And we need to cover the whole value chain. So it cannot only be finance. Policy is in fact a critical success factor. So the regulatory framework that is custom tailored to cater for the different national circumstances of each region or each country or each industry. And then finance must be made available, accessible and affordable, not only by making pledges, by ensuring that the mechanisms that will allow for those who need it are easy for them to tap into, and ensure the delivery of this money on a timely basis. And then we talk about capacity building. Capacity building is essential. You cannot go through this transition if you don't invest in human capital. Human capital is going to be a building block of going from where we are into the new future. That is coupled with the ability of being able to transfer technology, but not obsolete technology, technology that is new, that is modern, that will build on advancements that have already been accomplished, and by applying scale and capital in the developing world, and that is where it is really needed the most.
Can I
that
just
is our view.
Quickly chip in, because what Dr. Sultan Al-Jabr is saying here is exactly what makes me optimistic. And I am optimistic because industrialized countries are now reporting reduced emissions, not because they stopped growing, but because the new technologies are coming online, which has cut the link between economic growth and emission growth. So it works. And the good news is for developing countries is that most of these new technologies are actually allowing for less expensive energy, not more expensive energy, because solar power, for instance, will beat coal power in most countries, and particularly those that have a lot of sun. However, you need to get to the investment. You need technology, you need the investments, you need to get the grids. So there is definitely a point about technology transfer, competence transfer, regulatory transfer of solutions. But most countries will be smart enough, I think, to choose the cheaper option over the more expensive option. And the new tends to be less expensive than the old in the long run. You just have to get to the long run, and that's why all these themes are so deeply connected. And this is what makes me optimistic, because it's actually going to be better, cleaner, and cheaper to be a modern economy than an old-fashioned economy.
And allow me to add, in an effort to help address that gap, we created a custom-tailored climate finance vehicle to act as a catalytic tool. Altera, the $30 billion announced by His Highness the President on the first day. It was created to do just that, to help bridge the gap, to help capacity building, to help ensure that we are able to apply scale and capital in bridging the gap and going through the transition. We practice what we preach, and when we commit, we deliver.
I wanted just to complement that technology transfer and capacity building are not only important for mitigation but also for adaptation, because resilience is a capacity. A society that is resilient needs institutions that are able to cope with disturbances that we are seeing in this case as extreme events of the impact of climate change. So it is very critical that the means of implementation are also part on how we advance on adaptation to build that resilient world.
Thank you very much. I'm afraid we're going to have to draw it to a close. I know there are many more questions in the room, and it's provoked a lot of debate here. We have, obviously, our ministers are very busy, so I'd like to thank very much Dr. Sultan Simon and the COP28 ministerial pairs for joining us. Good luck to you as you get back to the negotiating table. We're very grateful for your leadership. Everyone, we will be back at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow, so if you have further queries, please contact the press office. Thank you very much.